Known to everyone. So let's begin our discussion on a case study done on success story in digital gaming by Blink Digital for client Dream11. I would like to welcome our speaker for this session, Felix Joy, creative strategist, Blink Digital. Thank you for joining us today, Felix, and it's a pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure is mine.
So now before I request you to take over, I'm requesting all the delegates to keep posting their questions in the chat box, and the speaker will address a selected few at the end of the session. Over to you, Felix.
Thank you. Um, I'm assuming my screen is visible. Please let me know otherwise.
Right.
Yeah. So let's begin. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. To begin with, let me just give you a quick introduction about myself. I am Felix Joy. I am a creative strategist at Blink Digital. At Blink Digital, we offer a host of services across strategic planning, creative conceptualization and development, media and tech, and we do so across a spectrum of industries like QSR, OTT, FMCG, you name it. And our work, luckily and fortunately for us, has been awarded and recognized internationally as well as domestically at the Webbies, the One Show, and the Clio, and so forth. Uh, so now that the introductions are out of place, let's start by telling you why we've selected this specific case study for today. The context obviously is the global pandemic that we are all going through, with distance becoming a problem and the fact that we are all confined to the walls of our own homes. Gaming has seen an unprecedented growth. There's almost a 22% annual growth that the industry sees, and it's projected to reach up to around 500 million smartphones all across the country. Now that's a large volume of audiences that are waiting to sort of digest your brand message. That being said, one of the things that we do in gaming is we handle a lot of our clients, like for example Intel, there's Rummy Circle, Spartan Poker, and one of them is also Dream11. Dream11, as you know, is an online fantasy sporting platform, and you can sort of create fantasy teams and play and trade different players to, in the end, eventually win money. So the skill aspect of the game is something that we talk about a lot. Now, setting some context into when this campaign went live. Uh, in 2019, the ICC World Cup in England and Wales was by far one of the biggest sporting extravaganzas of the year. Everyone, especially in India, was tuning in to watch cricket, experience the magic live, and were heavily engaged in the content itself. And given the fact that we're reaching into, like I said before, 500 million smartphones across the country, uh, this was a fertile time for Dream11 to advertise its brand offering and get more consumers on board. But like with any advertising campaign or project, we obviously run into a couple of roadblocks. And the roadblocks for this were twofold to begin with. First is the one issue that I think all advertisers have unanimously faced at some point, which is the budget. The ICC World Cup sponsorships go upwards of $50 million, with your key brand sponsors cracking a sponsorship deal with the ICC for at least a minimum of $2 to $3 million. And now that's a lot of money for any brand to sort of shell out. The second challenge that I think we faced as a brand was the fact that there were so many people vying for the same piece of pie. The fact that there are so many people tuning into ICC World Cup meant that a Nissan, a Coca-Cola, a Booking.com all wanted to advertise for the same few elements in the game itself. So to give you an example, and I'm pretty sure you all must have all been familiar with experiences like this, where they say that title sponsor Nissan brings to you with along with streaming sponsor Star Sports and travel sponsor Booking.com. We present to you Oppo Super Sixes, for example. Now, as you can probably guess, there's a lot of brands that are being integrated into the same piece of messaging. So it was very important for the brand to be distinct in its communication and not get lost in the clutter of brands that we were tapping into. So the question or the real objective that we as advertisers faced was how do you advertise to a disinterested customer? As you know, any consumer that's tuning in during the cricket season wants just that, the thrill of the sport itself. So putting in your brand message is often seen as sort of an interference. And unless it's done in a seamless, subtle way, it's often not taken well by the consumer. And of course, the budget constraints make this task even more difficult. So, what did we do? Well, we started off by looking for insights online. We use social listening tools, search trends, and a host of other things to understand what your audience behavior would be like with respect to the World Cup or during the World Cup with respect to cricket. Now, while obviously we didn't have data for how the World Cup is going to be shaping out in 2020, what we did have was a really good proxy, which was the Indian Premier League. It had happened like just a couple of months ago, I think. And the consumer behavior, if you think about it, is pretty similar, other than the differences in the nature of the sport itself. And the one thing that was glaring in our faces when we surveyed online data about user behavior was the fact that everyone at some point or the other goes in and tunes into highlights. Whether you've seen the match, whether you've not seen the match, everybody does this thing, when they go on to the next day and YouTube IPL XXX match highlights, and they'll relive the magic, they relive the experience. And while this can be seen as a claim, this actually was a behavior that was duplicated even during the World Cup, and this became evident when the ICC released data about their YouTube behavior regarding their content later, where they said that around 1.4 billion new subscribers logged in around 2.3 billion minutes of content viewing. That means that a large section of your cricket viewing audience eventually does come to YouTube to watch the highlights and to experience the thrill of the game again. So we thought that this was a great space where we could integrate our communication. But again, the question rises, how do you do that without really shelling out those big bucks for a sponsorship deal? Well, uh, let me not tell you how it all went. I'll just play the case video. This is a big moment. They've got to run. They got the other end. Oh, he gets in the So to sum it up, what we achieved with a pre-roll was three broad objectives. First was the cost effectiveness of the campaign itself, where you have brands shelling out billions and millions for World Cup sponsorship. We did it in, let's say, maybe a fraction of the cost with just a set of pre-rolls that were targeted and placed smartly enough for the consumer to digest at the right moment when they were looking for it. The second thing is, of course, the intent in the minds of the consumer. So any consumer who would come on to YouTube to watch the highlights is not a consumer who's just interested in cricket on the offhand. He's someone who's engaged on the sport and hence a very valued potential customer for Dream11. So tapping into that relevant audience was something that really worked for us in this case. The third thing that I think is very important, especially in the light of the current advertising background, where you have a lot of advertisers on the same platforms, we made sure that the experience itself was very seamless. So as you see, the from just putting in the search term to seeing the video, there's just a lag of 6 seconds in which we seamlessly integrate our communication without it being too in your face or too subtle, just the right amount. Yeah, like we say, the Goldilocks ratio. That was something that we planned to happen to achieve through this pre-roll campaign, and that in due course led to some great results. A personal achievement for the team itself was the fact that we were awarded the honor as an honorary in the Webby Awards, which was held in New York in 2020. While obviously we didn't get to fly to the States for the same, we did experience the happiness and the thrill that comes with being awarded and recognized, of having your work recognized globally. So if there was something that maybe we could take away, we thought that that could be something that we list out in the rest of the presentation. So here it is, a Webby Honoree's guide to advertising effectively in an ad-saturated market. Three broad pointers. One, digital data is the new primary research. So here's the thing, a lot of us often go to primary research for the best insights, and of course they do, it does have its merit, I won't lie. But if you often know the right place to look online, you will find the data that you're looking for. And there are a bunch of options for that. Like, for example, we make use of social listening tools, we make use of Google search data, we make use of ORM, and there are a lot of other conversations that you can and platforms you can look at online to get the same sorts of refined insights. Then it just becomes a matter of how you cut that data and sort of interpret the data to get the right kind of insight that will lead you to a successful campaign. The second thing is, I think, one issue that advertisers have always sort of struggled to keep the balance with, which is building for the consumer and not the brand. A lot of brands, in our experience, try to make use of any ad real estate out there and put in all sorts of messaging. There will be the brand name, the campaign name, product name, there will be a CTA, all of it condensed into one 6 second pre roll. For an audience that is just looking to view his content, putting so much messaging into the same creative often leads to, well, the message being diluted in itself, which is something that we actively avoided during this campaign. So even if you see our pre-rolls, they just call out the brand name, and then there is a small CTA that talks about what how the consumer can make use of Dream11 and the knowledge he gains in the highlights in his activity on Dream11, the app itself. Now, the third thing, and I think by far the most important thing, is the fact of the approach. It is no longer creative and media. It is more creative. It is no longer creative then media. It is now creative and media. So, to elaborate on that, what we often see is that we come from this approach where we make one sample master creative and then place it across different platforms and just hope that it will all work out in the end, right? But the digital behavior of a consumer is often not like that. When he comes to a platform, the user journey on every platform is very different. Like on Twitter, he might just skim through the videos, and on YouTube, he might go through every video in detail. So the behavior often dictates the content of the ad, and hence it cannot be stressed upon well enough that the fact that on digital it is very important that creative and media sort of form a symbiotic relationship where they build off the strengths of each other and thus put forward a consolidated, more refined brand messaging rather than looking at it independently. So there you have it, the three learnings: digital data being the new primary research, building for the consumer and not the brand, and finally creative and media, not creative then media. And yeah, with that, I'd like to invite any questions that you guys may have.
Wonderful, Felix. We do have a question actually. With the
Yeah.
increasing comfort with digital platforms in India, how does Dream11 plan for new acquisition and retention of its users going forward?
I'm sorry, your voice sort of cracked in the middle. Please repeat that question.
I'll repeat it. With
Yeah.
increasing comfort with digital platforms in India,
Hmm.
How does Dream11 plan for new acquisition and retention of its users going forward?
Okay. So I'd actually like to answer this in two discrete steps. First is the fact that I can't really speak for how Dream11 would go on in its future plans because, of course, there is always an NDA that's signed. But the second part of it, I can address this in a more generalistic terms, where I say that how are brands as an overall planning to increase retention. One of the key things is this focus on content, right? Where you earlier always had content that was meant to be very entertaining. We now have those subtle plugins which we utilize. The second thing that we often do is looking for new formats. Now, this is something that we see as a trend overall, where earlier you just had those static posts, which then eventually became video posts and then became vertical videos. So the more as more technology progresses, we are seeing a lot of brands and a lot of platform media platforms themselves creating these different innovations and different formats that you can sort of leverage. So I think that itself lends itself to a richer consumer experience, especially in terms of establishing a dialogue with your customer. So yeah, that would ideally be two broad things that I can think of. There will obviously be specifics that we can go into with respect to different brands according to the different times and the platforms. But that's I think something I can take offline rather than getting into right now.
Got it. There's another question for you.
Yeah.
Will mobile gaming, which is seeing a high right now,
Hmm.
and in the run up to IPL, eventually drop once the COVID situation has passed?
No, not actually, because so one of the reasons that a lot of people have begun talking about gaming right now is because when the lockdown hit, it was at a time when people didn't really have anything to do, and everyone came on to gaming platforms at the same time, which led to this really accelerated growth on the platform, which is why the sudden rise in gaming was brought to light during the last couple of months. But actually, if you think about it, gaming has been something that has been growing globally in the last couple of years, actually. So even if you see in the US, where PlayStation and Xbox had an entire war between them, where who would own the gaming space, with Stadia coming in, where you have a democratization of how gaming can be seen in the future. And not just that, even with hyper casual games, you have different formats of the game. So to answer that question, gaming isn't something that is a trend in the COVID section. It has been around and it's been growing steadily. It's just that we have all come to notice the enormous power of it in the last couple of months.
Wonderful. One more question, please. Which works better, video ads versus image ads in terms of performance marketing? Influencer marketing overshadowing the performance marketing.
Sorry, I didn't catch the second part. You mentioned
So,
influence marketing.
influencer marketing, is it overshadowing the performance marketing?
Um, I wouldn't say overshadowing because both of them come from two different schools of thought and in terms of the objective itself. If I take performance marketing for that fact, it would be mostly driven towards a certain CTA where I want them to go to a landing page or I want them to download an app or something that is more business oriented. Influencer marketing comes more from the school of thought of building a brand as an entity, creating the right kind of associations, making sure your consumes that message. So I think performance marketing is great, and I think it you can't really replace the effectiveness when it comes to lower funnel metrics like conversion. But influencers, I think, are something that can work right from the top to the middle funnel. And yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can play with it. So the sort of versatility you get with an influencer content marketing campaign is much higher than with the performance marketing campaign.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. I think time is also almost up now.
Yeah,
So we'll quickly wind up the session now.
sure.
Thank you, Felix, for joining in today. It was such a pleasure to hear you, to have you here. Now, before I end the session, I would like to thank our sponsors, Telesign, ShareChat, Blink Digital, and Nelson. I would request our delegates to visit our exhibition booths. Thank you.